Today we're going to talk about percent and fractions. So let's go back to our previous lesson about constant rate of change. Looking at this graph, what can you tell me? What is happening to this graph? It seems as though the bracelets are increasing for every girl. When you have more girls, you have more bracelets. So it seems like there are 4 bracelets for 1 girl, 8 bracelets for 2 girls, 12 bracelets for 3 girls, 16 bracelets for 4 girls. Is this steadily changing at a constant rate? It's very steady. So from what I can tell, I think there are 4 bracelets per girl. It seems like it's increasing. There's just 4 bracelets for every girl. It increases another 4 bracelets for the next girl. It increases the next 4 more bracelets for the next girl. Increases another 4 more bracelets for the next girl. So it's increasing 4 bracelets per girl. Alright, let's do our percent. So Bree purchased a bag of 100 marbles. This is a 10 by 10 grid. There are 100 squares in here. Of the 100 marbles, 1/4 of the marbles were blue. I guess I should shade blue. So shade it. How many did I just shade? I shade 1/4 of it, but it seems like I shaded 5, 10, 50, 20, 25 out of 100. What percent did I shade? If each one of these represents 1%, and so there's 100 of them, 100%, I shaded 25 squares, or 25%. And if each square represents 1/100ths as a decimal, and I shaded 25, what decimal would that be? I would shade 25 hundredths. In the next example, Martin's penny collection, 3/5 of the pennies were minted. So let's break this into 5 groups. So 3/5 of it were minted. So use this grid to show me this fine. So out of the 100 pennies, how many were minted? 60 of them were. Because I shaded in 60 of the squares, 60 of the 100 square. If each one of these little squares represent a percent, and there are 100% in all, what percent were shaded? 60%. If each one of these little squares represents 1/100ths, and I shaded 60 of them, it'll be 60 hundredths. So 60 hundredths is the same as saying 60%, which is the same thing as saying 60 hundredths. Next question. So let's do it more gridding. So I have 100 squares here. I want to break it off into 5 sections. I would like to shade in 4 of the sections. So of the 100 squares, how many did I color? 80 of them, 80 out of 100. If each one of these represents 1/100ths, what is our decimal? 0 and 80 hundredths. So use words to describe the shaded portion of the hundredths model. I shaded 80 out of 100. Another way of saying this, I shaded 80 per 100. I shaded 80 per 100 of those. So what percent is shaded? If each one of these squares represents 1%, how many percent did I shade? 80%. So let's try our next picture. So there's this circle is divided into 10 sections. Also, you see these little lines, the little mark, each one represents 1%. So I shaded 3 of the 10. So I shaded 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. So if each one of these represents 1%, 2%, 3, or there's 100 markings here, I shaded 30 of the markings. What decimal? 0 and 30 hundredths. So what's another way of saying this? I shaded 30 per 100, or 30 out of 100. So what percent is shaded? 30%, because each one of these represents 1%. So I shaded 30% of this. So now let's do some bar diagrams now for this. So we're going to use bar diagram for this. So we have 0% to 100%. This represents a bar. Well, we know the middle would be 50%. Where would you find 40% in this bar? I know it's going to be somewhere in this area. But you know what? I'm going to demark this, break this down into sections by 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 60%, 70%, 80%, and 90%. So I'm going to model 40%. As you can tell, 40% is less than 50%. If I ask you what fraction did I just shade, you'll say I shaded 4 out of 10. Another way to say it is I shaded in 40% out of 100%. Or I shaded 40%. All of these mean the exact same thing. 4/10 is the same as saying 40 hundredths, which is the same thing as saying 40%. In the next example, where would you find 15% in here? If this is 100%, this whole bar, I predict that 50% will be somewhere right here. You know what? I'm going to demark this by counting by 5. So I know this is 50% right here in the middle. So I'm going to count by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50. Whoops. Let's scoot this down. Oops. Right there. Much better now. 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 100%. So in this bar diagram, you have 100%. So it's shaded. If each one of these little sections represents 5%, this is 5%, 10%, 15%. So this is 5%, 10%, 15% right there. So I shaded in 15% of this. So as you can tell, it's less than 50%. But if I can ask you, what fraction of this bar did you shade in? I would say I shaded in 3 of the 20 sections. Or another way I can say, I shaded 15% out of 100%. Did you know this simplifies to 3/20? Did you know you can build this up into 1500ths? And another way to say is I shaded 15%. So do you see how we did so many little equivalencies here? All of these meant the same thing. So what is percent exactly? The word percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. As you notice, we kept comparing to 100. In our picture, we had 100. In this one, we had 100 squares, always comparing to 100. It could be written as the following. Out of 100, you can say as per 100, or out of 100, or even write it as a ratio like this, something over 100. For example, let's do 24%. 24%, you can say it as 24 out of 100, 24 per 100, or 24 over 100. Sometimes you can simplify the ratio. So there's so many ways of saying this. You can say 24 per 100. Per 100. It's the same as saying 24 out of 100, which is the same thing as saying 24%. And percent means per 100. So 24 per 100. And that simplified breaks down to 6/25. And then you can write it as a decimal as 24 hundredths. So all of these, so by the end of this unit, which is the next few presentation, YouTube, you're going to be able to find all the equivalencies of these. So let's do some example. The Titanic Toy Company has a 4% return rate on its product. Write this percent as a fraction. So if you think you had a 10 by 10 grid, you would have to shade in 4 of those. So you would shade in 4 out of per 100. So again, what does percent mean? Per 100 or out of 100. That's how I memorize it. Percent means per 100 or out of 100. So we have 4 per 100 or 4 out of 100. Can you break this down? Can we break this down by simplifying? Divide both numbers by 4 and you get 1/25. So 4% is the same as saying 4 per 100 or 4 out of 100, which is the same as breaking it down to 1/25. All 3 of these mean the exact same thing. Next one. There are 4 trombones out of 25 instruments in the Landerstown Band. What percent of the instruments are trombones? So there's 4 trombones out of 25 instruments. I need to find the percent. What does percent mean again? Percent means per 1/25. 100 or out of 100? Oh, it's a proportion again. We learned this. Do we need to break it down or do we need to build it up? We need to build this up by multiplying by 4. So 4 out of 25 is the same thing as saying 16% per 100. So what percent of it is 16%? So 16% is the same thing as saying 16 per 100, which is the same thing as saying 4/25. To check your work, what does percent mean? Per 100. If you broke this down by dividing by 4, you get 4/25. And there you go, right there. In a recent NBA season, Chandler Parsons made 20% of his field goal. That's what you get for moving to Dallas. Actually, he was kind of forced there. What fraction of his field goals did Parsons make? So 20%. Again, what does percent mean? Per 100. So let's turn it to, or it also means out of 100. So we need to break this down. I'm going to divide both numbers by 20, and you get 1/5. So 1/5 is the same thing as saying 20%, or 20 per 100. So again, we're finding all the different equivalencies. So again, what does percent mean? Per 100. On Saturday afternoon, 6 out of 8 phone calls taken at the Overlook restaurant were for dinner reservation. What percent of the telephone calls were for dinner reservation? So they want us to find the percent. What does percent mean again? Percent means per 100. So I need to turn this fraction into per 100. Can 8 be built up to 100? No. But can we break this down by simplifying to 3/4? Now can it be built up? Yes, you multiply it by 25. So 75% of the phone calls were for dinner reservation. So 75% is the same thing as saying 75 per 100, which can be simplified to 3/4, and this can be built up to 6/8. All of these mean the exact same thing. So what we had to do here is we had to figure out what is the equivalency of 6/8 to per 100, or out of 100. The local bowling team won 4 out of 16 of their games this year. Good for them. What percent of their games did the team win? So percent. What does percent mean again? Per 100. Can 16 be built up to 100? I don't think so. But can we simplify 4/16? If I divide both numbers by 4, it's 1/4. Now can you build up 1/4 to 100? Yes, you can, by multiplying by 25. So it's 25% out of 100, or 25%. Again, let's correct our work. Let's just make sure we did this. 25% means the same thing as saying 25 per 100, which simplified to 1/4, and 1/4 can be built up back to 4/16. So they all mean the same thing. So what percent of the games did the team win? 25%, or 25 per 100. And let's try the next one. Oh, my Tyra again. Tyra only accepted 3 out of 15 love letters from Mr. Joe. What? Ugh. What percent of love letters did she not accept? So how many did she reject? Let's see. If there are 15 love letters, how many did she reject or not accept? 12 out of 15, she said, no, I do not want this from the stalker. From my boyfriend. So let's see. So we need to find a percent. What does percent mean again? Per 100. Can 15 be built up to 100? Not really, but can we break this down? You can break this down by dividing both numbers by 3. So you get 4/5. Now can you build it up? Yes, you can, by 20. So 80% of the letters, she said, no, I do not want him to send it to me. So it's 80%. Let's check our work. What does 80% mean again? 80 per 100. Can you break this down? 8/10. Can you break this down? 4/5. Can you build it up back to 12/15? Yes, you can. So they all mean the same thing. So the answer is 80%. So 80 per 100 letters she rejected. So in this study, we learned what percent it is. What's the definition of percent again? It means per 100 or out of 100. So when they give you a fraction and they ask you to turn it to a percent, you must figure out what percent per 100. So you need to build it up. However, if they give you a percent like this, you know percent means per 100. Can you break it down into a fraction? So this is fractions and percent.